Today's parable tells of an inheritance squandered on dissolute living, but the prodigal son hopes that the father will somehow take him back. The passage from Micah also talks about hope. The people of Judah have been trampled underfoot and driven off a foreign land. This disaster was due to the people's sins, insisted the prophet, and must not be explained just by the enemy's vastly superior army. Even now that the exile has ended and the poverty-stricken people have returned to Jerusalem, they are insignificant numerically and economically. The prophet begs God to show us wonderful signs as you have sworn to your fathers from days of old. The prodigal son survived on his memories and so was courageous enough to seek a way back. Coming to his senses at last meant that the goodness of the Father, planted within the bones and blood of the Son, finally caught up with the young man and overcame his wayward resistance. A beautiful touch in Jesus' parable indicates that from a distance the Father was willing the boy to come home before the Son ever noticed him. It almost seems as if the Father's desire had been reaching across miles and mountains to touch the faith of the Son. The Son's remembrance might even be like a passive surrender to a hidden stimulant, calling out for love and celebration. Our church needs a new injection of confidence. Trust in God's care is our legacy to future generations. Instead of letting the tidal wave of media condemnation sweep us away, we need to take heart from the recovery of the prodigal son. All of God's sons and daughters are called back to the right path, to a joyful homecoming. We may ultimately celebrate like the Father upon the return of the prodigal son. When God's deeply planted life in us makes all these claims come true, the family of God's children will be complete. The secret source of St. Francis Xavier's irresistible magnetism and indomitable courage lay in his love of God, his trust in Him, and his zeal for souls. If the difficulties only increased his determination to press ahead, it was because his strength came from God, the God he loved above all, with all his heart and soul, the God he trusted so blindly. The dreaded islands of Moro were the islands of hope in God. His only fear was not to trust sufficiently in His mercy. His greatest comfort, the conviction of his total inadequacy for the task of preaching the gospel. That like St. Francis Xavier, I too may learn to totally trust God's mercy and love for me. Let's pray for this grace for one another.